Yo, something new has happened in the YNW Melly case, and even he is terrified. We have been waiting on a verdict for years now, and it seems Melly knows something we don't because the way he looked in court is very worrying and has everyone on edge. The courtroom doors swing open, and there's YNW Melly, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame, that famous smile flashing across his face like nothing's wrong. 1 second he's grinning at the cameras, playing with his hair, looking like he's about to drop a new single. Next second, he's slamming his fist on the defense table, screaming about how they're violating his rights, how this whole thing is a setup. The guards tense up, lawyers shuffle papers nervously, and everyone in that courtroom gets a front row seat to the most controversial show in hip-hop right now. See, this ain't just about a murder trial anymore. This is about Melvin versus Melly, about a young genius trapped between two worlds, about whether your art can be used to bury you. And with these new courtroom clips going viral, showing Melly switching from charming to hostile in seconds flat, the whole world's asking the same question. Is this the behavior of an innocent man fighting for his life? Or are we watching a killer who can't keep his mask on straight? Chapter 1. The double murder that changed everything. October 26, 2018 started like any other night in South Florida. The heat was sticky, the music was loud, and 4 young brothers from the trenches were riding together dreaming about making it out. YNW Melly, born Jamel Demons, was in that car with his day ones, Christopher YNW Juvie Thomas Jr. and Anthony YNW Sackchaser Williams. These weren't just friends, these were brothers who came up together, who shared the same struggles, who made a pact to get rich or die trying. By the time the sun came up, 2 of them would be dead, and the story that followed would shake the entire hip-hop world to its core. The official narrative went like this. Melly and his homie Cortland, YNW Bortland, Henry claimed they were victims of a drive-by shooting. They said they were just riding through Miramar when shots started flying, when their brothers got hit, when everything went to hell. Melly was crying, devastated, posting tributes on Instagram about losing his brothers to street violence. He posted, "They took my brothers from me over jealousy. I'll ride for y'all till the death of me." The pain in his post seemed real. The tears at the funeral looked genuine. But the cops weren't buying it. And what's crazy is they had receipts. See, when forensics got involved, the story started falling apart like a cheap alibi. The bullet trajectories didn't match a drive-by. The angles were all wrong. The evidence was pointing inside the vehicle, not outside. Detective Christopher Williams from Miramar Police Department said in his report, "The physical evidence doesn't support the story being told. The shots came from inside the vehicle. Police said the shots that killed Juvie and Sackchaser came from inside that car, from someone sitting right there with them. And just like that, the narrative flipped from tragic loss to cold-blooded betrayal. What made this even crazier was the alleged motive, or lack of one. This wasn't about money, wasn't about beef, wasn't about some female. Prosecutors started floating theories about jealousy, about internal YNW politics, about Melly feeling like his boys were holding him back. State Attorney Harold Pryor later said in a press conference, "This was a case of 2 young men who lost their lives, and 2 others who tried to cover it up with a fake story. But real talk, nobody could wrap their head around why someone would kill their own blood like that. These boys had matching tattoos, shared the same dreams, came from the same struggle." The arrest came in February 2019, and it hit different. Melly was on the verge of superstardom. His single "Murder on My Mind" was climbing the charts, sitting at number 6 on Billboard, and suddenly he's in handcuffs facing double murder charges. The irony wasn't lost on anybody. Here's a kid rapping about murder who's now accused of actually doing it. The streets were divided instantly. Some said this was just another case of the system trying to destroy a young black man on the rise. Others whispered that the signs were always there, that Melly been moving funny, that something about him was always off. YNW Bortland got charged too, accused of being the accomplice of helping stage the fake drive-by scene. The prosecution painted a picture of 2 friends conspiring to eliminate their own, then trying to cover it up with a story straight out of a movie. According to court documents after the shooting, Melly and Bortland drove around with the bodies for like 45 minutes, eventually taking them to Memorial Hospital Miramar, where they spun their tale about getting ambushed. The nurse who took their statement, Jennifer Rodriguez, later testified. Their story kept changing. First they said it happened on one street, then another. Details weren't adding up. The evidence started piling up quick. Cell phone records, forensic analysis, surveillance footage. The state was building their case piece by piece. They had the trajectory analysis showing the shots came from inside the vehicle. They had cell phone data allegedly placing everyone exactly where they shouldn't have been. They even claimed to have evidence that Melly and Bortland were researching accessories for the alleged murder weapon before the shooting. What's wild is they found searches for .40 caliber drum magazine on a phone allegedly linked to Melly just days before the murders. The search history showed best place to buy extended clip and where to get drum magazine, Florida. But here's where it gets complicated. Melly's defense team came out swinging, poking holes in everything. They questioned the forensic evidence, challenged the cell phone data, suggested alternative theories. Defense attorney Bradford Cohen told reporters outside the courthouse, "The evidence is circumstantial at best. This young man is innocent and we'll prove it." They painted their client as a victim of circumstance, a rising star being railroaded by a system that loves to see young black men fall. The stage was set for one of the most controversial trials in hip-hop history. What nobody talks about enough is how this case exposed the dark side of making it out the hood. These weren't strangers beefing over territory. These were brothers who survived the trenches together, who were supposed to celebrate success together. The fact that two of them ended up dead in that car represents something deeper than just another murder case. It's about loyalty, betrayal, and what happens when street life meets mainstream success. The impact on the YNW collective was devastating. What started as a movement of young, hungry artists from Broward County turned into a cautionary tale. The matching chains, the brotherhood anthems, the promises to stay solid, all of it seemed hollow now. Fans who followed their come-up felt betrayed, confused, unable to reconcile the image of brotherhood with the reality of bloodshed. One fan tweeted, "How you kill your day once? Make it make sense." These boys had YNW tatted on them. Another posted on Instagram, "I've been following since day one. This can't be real." Social media became a battlefield of theories and accusations. Old videos got analyzed for signs of tension. Lyrics got dissected for hidden meanings. Every interaction between Melly and the victims got scrutinized. People started noticing things. How Melly would sometimes look at Juvie in certain videos, how Sack Chaser would move when Melly was around. Maybe it was all confirmation bias, people seeing what they wanted to see. Or maybe the signs were always there. There's this one video from 2017 where they're all freestyling, and when Juvie's verse gets more love, you can see Melly's face change for just a second. Could mean nothing, could mean everything. The prosecution's theory evolved over time. They started suggesting this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment crime, but something planned. Assistant State Attorney Christine Bradley would later argue in court, this was premeditated murder disguised as a random act of violence. The defendants researched weapons, planned the location, and executed their friends. They pointed to life insurance policies worth $100,000 each, to financial motivations, to career opportunities that might open up with certain people out of the picture. Each new revelation made the case more shocking, more unbelievable. How could someone plan to kill their own brothers? Meanwhile, Melly sat in jail, maintaining his innocence, dropping music when he could, trying to keep his career alive from behind bars. His team released songs like Dangerously in Love and Suicidal. Music videos filmed before his arrest kept his social media active. But the shadow of October 26, 2018 hung over everything. Every song got analyzed through the lens of the murder charges. Every lyric became potential evidence. Every video became a piece of the puzzle. His Instagram bio read innocent until proven guilty, but the court of public opinion was already in session. The families of Juvie and Sack Chaser had to navigate their own complex emotions. These were boys who loved Melly, who believed in the YNW movement, who died allegedly at the hands of someone they trusted completely. Some family members stood by Melly, refusing to believe he could do something so cold. Juvie's mother, Leandra Phillips, posted on Facebook, "I know in my heart Melly didn't do this. He loved my son like a brother." But Sack Chaser's cousin went on live saying, "Y'all supporting the killer? My cousin dead and y'all talking about free Melly." Others demanded justice, convinced that their loved ones were betrayed in the worst possible way. As the case developed, it became clear this wasn't just about guilt or innocence. This was about the culture, about how young black men navigate success, about the prices paid for leaving the streets behind. Whether Melly pulled that trigger or not, two young men were dead, and their deaths represented a tragedy that went beyond any verdict. The streets were watching, waiting to see if justice would be served or if another young black man would be swallowed by the system. Chapter 2, Melvin versus Melly. Understanding YNW. Melly means understanding that there's always been two people living in that body. There's Melvin, the soft-spoken kid from Gifford who writes poetry, who cries when he talks about his grandmother, who dreams about buying his mama a house. Then there's Melly, the savage who talks about catching bodies, who moves with demons, who smiles when describing violence. This ain't just some rap persona or marketing gimmick. People who know him say this split is real, that you never know which version you're going to get, that the switch can happen in seconds. The duality started showing up early in his music. One track would be a melodic confession about depression and pain. The next would be a graphic description of street violence. Fans loved it, called it versatility, said it showed his range. But looking back now, with everything that's happened, that split personality hits different. Was this artistic expression, or was this a young man wrestling with something darker? In interviews before the arrest, Melly would sometimes catch himself mid-sentence, like one personality was interrupting the other. He'd be talking about peace and love, then suddenly his eyes would change and he'd start describing violent scenarios with a little too much detail, a little too much enthusiasm. In a 2018 interview with Adam 22 on No Jumper, Melly said, "Sometimes I wake up and I don't even know who I am. Like, am I Melly or am I Melvin today? It's like two different people in one body, you feel me?" Adam 22 laughed it off, but looking back, that statement hits different. Interviewers would laugh it off, chalk it up to him being young and wild. But some people noticed the pattern, saw something unsettling in those personality switches. The courtroom footage that's been circulating shows this duality in full effect. One clip shows Melly entering the courtroom all smiles, waving at people, adjusting his hair like he's about to perform. Minutes later, another clip shows him exploding at the judge, screaming about his rights, having to be calmed down by his lawyers. You can hear him yelling, "Y'all been holding me for 6 years. This is unconstitutional. Y'all violating my rights." His lawyer trying to calm him down, but Melly's not having it. It's like watching two different people inhabit the same body, fighting for control. His childhood friends from Gifford tell stories about this split going way back. They remember Melvin, the kid who would share his last dollar, who would cry when stray dogs got hit by cars, who wrote love letters for other kids who couldn't spell. One childhood friend who wanted to stay anonymous told Vlad TV, "Melvin was the sweetest kid. He'd help old ladies with groceries, give you his last. But when he turned into Melly, that was somebody else completely. Eyes would go dead, whole energy would shift." But they also remember Melly emerging when Melvin got pushed too far, when the streets demanded a different energy. They say you could see it in his eyes when the switch happened, like someone else took the wheel. The music became a battlefield for these two personalities. Songs like "Murder on My Mind" seemed to come from Melly's perspective, dark and unflinching. Lines like "Yellow tape around his body, it's a fucking homicide," came from somewhere deep and dark. But tracks like "Mama Cry" showed Melvin's heart, his pain, his desire to heal. When he sang, "I just want to see you happy, mama, I just want to see you smile," that was Melvin talking. Fans started categorizing his songs. This one's a Melvin track, that one's pure Melly. It became part of his appeal, never knowing which version would show up on a feature. DJ Academics once said on his stream, "You never know which Melly you're gonna get on a track. That's what makes him special, but also scary. One minute he's singing about love, next minute he's talking about drilling ops." What's wild is how he talked about this split himself. In that 2018 Complex interview before everything went down, he said, "Sometimes I don't even remember recording certain songs. I'll hear them back like, did I really say that? It's like somebody else was in the booth." At the time, people thought he was talking about being high or in the zone. Now, those words carry a different weight. He wasn't just talking about being in a creative zone, he was describing something deeper. At the time, people thought he was talking about being high or in the zone. Now, those words carry a different weight. He wasn't just talking about being in a creative zone, he was describing something deeper. His mother, Jamie Demons King, has spoken about noticing this duality from young. In an interview with Rolling Stone after his arrest, she said, "My son has always been two different people. There's my baby Melvin, and then there's this other person I don't recognize. When he was little, he'd be the sweetest child, helping me cook, doing his homework. Then something would switch and he'd be angry at the world." She described how her son could go from helping her cook dinner, being the perfect child, to suddenly becoming withdrawn and aggressive for no apparent reason. She tried therapy when he was 12, tried talking to him, but Melvin would always come back and apologize for whatever Melly had done. It was like he was apologizing for someone else's actions. The prosecutors have latched onto this split personality as part of their case. They're not claiming insanity. That would actually help his defense. Instead, they're arguing that the Melly persona is the real one, that Melvin is just a mask he wears to manipulate people. Prosecutor Christine Bradley stated in court, "This isn't mental illness. This is calculated manipulation." The defendant knows exactly what he's doing when he switches between personas. They've brought in experts to analyze his lyrics, his interviews, his social media posts, trying to paint a picture of someone who enjoys violence, who uses his softer side to avoid consequences. But the defense sees it differently. They argue that this duality is common in artists from traumatic backgrounds, that it's a coping mechanism, not evidence of homicidal tendencies. Defense psychologist Dr. Michael Brannon testified, "Many artists create alter egos to process trauma. Think about Eminem and Slim Shady. This is artistic expression, not criminal behavior. Mr. Demons experienced significant childhood trauma that manifested in this duality." They point to countless rappers who have similar splits between their street personas and their real selves. They say the prosecution is criminalizing mental health struggles, turning artistic expression into evidence. The jail calls that have been released show this internal battle continuing behind bars. One call from March 2023, he's talking to his mom about God, about redemption, about coming home and doing better. You can hear him say, "Mama, I'm gonna make you proud when I get out. I'm done with all that negative energy. I've been reading the Bible, I've been praying." The very next call, just 2 days later, he's talking wild to someone about what he's gonna do to his enemies when he gets out. When I touch down, it's up. These knuckles been talking crazy. It's like prison is amplifying the split, making the two personalities fight harder for control. Some psychologists who've weighed in on the case, not officially connected, just observing from the outside, have suggested this could be a form of dissociative identity disorder triggered by childhood trauma. Dr. Patricia Williams, a criminal psychologist, said on the True Crime Daily podcast, "Growing up in poverty, experiencing violence, losing friends, these traumas can fracture a developing mind. What we might be seeing with Mr. Demons is a genuine psychological split, not an act. Growing up in Gifford, losing friends to violence at a young age, experiencing poverty and pain, all of that can fracture a young mind. But without proper evaluation, it's all speculation. What makes this even more complex is how success affected the balance between Melvin and Melly. As the fame grew, as the money came in, some say Melly started taking over more. The streets were calling less, but the persona that survived those streets was harder to suppress. Success was supposed to save Melvin, but it might have empowered Melly. His producer, who goes by Track Bandit, told The Fader in 2020, "When the money started coming in, you could see him changing. The dark side was winning. He'd come to the studio as Melvin, leave as Melly." Friends describe studio sessions where he'd switch mid-recording. He'd be laying down a melodic hook as Melvin, then suddenly stop and demand they make the beat harder, darker. One engineer who worked with him, Mike Dean, not the famous one, said in a podcast, "It was like working with two different artists. You never knew who was going to show up to the session. I'd have two different setups ready. One for melodic Melvin, one for street Melly. Engineers learned to just roll with it, to have different beat selections ready for whoever showed up that day." Some of his best songs allegedly came from these personality clashes, from Melvin and Melly fighting for control of the mic. The tattoos tell their own story of duality, religious symbols mixed with violent imagery. His mother's name next to demonic faces, a cross on his forehead, but YNW for life across his neck. It's like his body became a canvas for the war between his two selves, each one marking territory, claiming space. The face tattoos especially seem to appear during Melly phases, permanent reminders of temporary mind states. He once posted on Instagram, "Every tattoo tells a story, some from Melvin, some from Melly, both part of me." Social media posts from before his arrest show this pattern clearly. Morning posts would be motivational quotes, pictures with family, positive energy. "Good morning, stay blessed, chase your dreams" type content. By nighttime, the content would shift. Cryptic threats, dark humor, references to violence, "Free all my hitters," "Death before dishonor," that type of energy. Fans thought it was just mood swings, the normal ups and downs of a young artist. But looking back, it seems like evidence of something deeper. One deleted tweet from 2018 read, "Melvin wants to love everybody. Melly wants to see the world burn. Who winning today?" Even his relationships reflected this split. Girls who dated him described two different boyfriends. Melvin would write poetry, plan romantic dates, talk about the future. Melly would be cold, paranoid, quick to anger over nothing. His ex-girlfriend, known as Mariah on social media, told the Shade Room in an exclusive, "Dating him was like dating two people. Sweet one day, scary the next. He'd write me love letters as Melvin, then Melly would accuse me of cheating for no reason." Some learned to recognize the signs of a switch coming. The way his jaw would tighten, how his voice would drop, and would give him space. Others got caught in the crossfire, never knowing which version they'd wake up next to. The question that haunts this case is whether Melvin could have controlled Melly that night in October 2018. If the prosecution's version is true, which personality pulled the trigger? Can Melvin be held responsible for Melly's actions? These aren't just philosophical questions. They're central to understanding what happened in that car and why. The jury's going to have to figure out if they're judging one person or two, and that's a question that don't have an easy answer. One thing's for sure, though, whether it's one person or two, somebody's responsible for what happened that night. Chapter 3, The Trial That Won't End. The legal saga of YNW Melly has become a masterclass in how the justice system can turn into a circus when hip-hop culture collides with criminal law. Since his arrest in February 2019, this case has seen more twists, delays, and controversial moments than a Netflix crime series. We're talking about retrials, hung juries, judge changes, and enough legal maneuvering to make your head spin. And through it all, Melly's been sitting in Broward County Jail watching his 20s disappear behind bars while the wheels of justice move at a snail's pace. The first major bombshell came when prosecutors announced they were seeking the death penalty. Let that sink in for a second. They wanted to execute a young man who was barely 20 years old when arrested. State Attorney Mike Satz made the announcement at a press conference saying, "The death penalty is warranted in this case due to the heinous nature of the crime and the fact that multiple victims were killed. The death penalty for a double murder where the motive was still murky, where the evidence was largely circumstantial. It sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community. This wasn't just about prison time anymore. This was about life and death." His legal team, led by Bradford Cohen and other high-profile attorneys, came out swinging against the death penalty decision. They filed motion after motion, challenging everything from the evidence collection to the prosecution's theories. In one filing that went viral on Twitter, Cohen wrote, "The state's decision to seek death is arbitrary and racially motivated. They don't seek death for white defendants with similar charges. They argued that seeking death for a young black man while white defendants got plea deals for similar crimes was textbook systemic racism. The courtroom became a battleground not just for Melly's fate, but for bigger questions about justice in America." Then came the first trial in 2023, and what a show that was. The prosecution laid out their case methodically: forensic evidence, cell phone records, that damning surveillance footage. They brought in experts to break down bullet trajectories, to explain why the shots had to come from inside the car. Lead prosecutor Christine Bradley told the jury in her opening statement, "The evidence will show that the victims were killed by someone they trusted, someone sitting right next to them. This wasn't a drive-by, this was an execution." They painted Melly as a cold-blooded killer who executed his friends and then tried to cover it up with a fake drive-by story. But the defense wasn't having it. They brought their own experts who challenged every piece of evidence. Forensic expert Dr. Kenneth Knox testified for the defense, saying, "The trajectory analysis is flawed. These shots could have come from outside the vehicle. The state's expert is making assumptions not supported by the evidence." They showed how the forensic analysis could be interpreted differently, how the cell phone data wasn't as clear-cut as the state claimed. They hammered home the point that there was no clear motive, no history of beef between Melly and the victims. Defense attorney Stuart Adelstein argued, "Where's the motive? These young men loved each other. The state wants you to believe someone killed their brothers for no reason." What really set this trial apart was the cultural element. You had a jury trying to understand drill music, street politics, and the complex relationships between young men from the trenches. The prosecution would play Melly's music videos, pointing out lyrics and imagery. The defense would counter that this was art, not evidence. Defense attorney Stuart Adelstein argued passionately, "We don't prosecute horror movie directors for making scary films. We don't arrest Stephen King for writing about murder. Why are we prosecuting musicians for making music?" It was like watching two different worlds try to communicate through broken translators. The viral moment came when prosecutor Christine Bradley played "Murder on My Mind" in court. The energy in that room shifted completely. You could see jurors leaning forward, absorbing lyrics about killing someone, about yellow tape and chalk lines. One juror who spoke anonymously to NBC Miami after the mistrial said, "Hearing that song in court was chilling. It changed how I saw everything. Even though they said it was recorded before, it was hard to unhear." The defense objected furiously, with Cohen standing up and saying, "Your Honor, this is prejudicial. This song has nothing to do with the alleged crimes." But the damage was done. The jury had heard Melly's voice describing murder in vivid detail. After weeks of testimony, after all the evidence and arguments, the jury couldn't reach a verdict. They were hung 9-3, with 9 voting guilty and 3 holding out for not guilty. Judge John Murphy III had to declare a mistrial, saying, "The jury has indicated they are hopelessly deadlocked after deliberating for nearly 20 hours. A mistrial was declared, and just like that, everything reset. All that time, all that money, all that emotional energy, wasted." Melly was going back to jail to wait for round 2. The mistrial sent shockwaves through both camps. The prosecution saw it as a temporary setback, a chance to refine their case. Prosecutor Harold Pryor told reporters, "We're disappointed but not deterred. We'll be ready for the retrial. Justice for the victims is coming." The defense saw it as vindication, proof that their client wasn't the monster the state portrayed. Melly himself seemed to take it as a sign, posting through his team on Instagram, "God got me. Truth always wins in the end. Thank you to the jurors who saw through the lies." But the reality was harsh. He was still locked up, still facing death, still trapped in legal limbo. Between trials, the legal maneuvering intensified. New motions were filed almost weekly. The defense challenged the jury selection process, argued for change of venue, demanded certain evidence be excluded. One motion filed by the defense in January 2024 stated, "Our client cannot receive a fair trial in Broward County due to pretrial publicity and the inflammatory nature of the media coverage." They even filed a motion to remove the death penalty based on Florida's new law requiring unanimous jury recommendations for death sentences. The prosecution fought back, trying to introduce new evidence, including jailhouse phone calls and new witness testimony. The judge had to referee this legal boxing match, making rulings that could literally determine life or death. One of the most controversial aspects has been the use of Melly's music and social media as evidence. The prosecution wanted to use everything: songs, Instagram posts, YouTube comments. They argued it showed state of mind, revealed confessions, demonstrated a pattern of violence. The defense countered that this was artistic expression protected by the First Amendment, that using rap lyrics as evidence was discriminatory and would have a chilling effect on hip-hop culture. Attorney Alex Spiro, who consulted on the case, said publicly, "Using rap lyrics as evidence is a dangerous precedent. It criminalizes black art." The judge had to walk a tightrope, balancing relevance against prejudice. The retrial date kept getting pushed back. First, it was early 2024, then summer 2024, then late 2024, now September 2025. Each delay meant more time in jail for Melly, more time for his career to stagnate, more time for witnesses' memories to fade. His team tried everything to get him released on bond, arguing that years of pretrial detention was cruel and unusual. In one passionate motion, they wrote, "Mr. Demons has been detained for over 2,000 days without a conviction. This violates his constitutional rights and amounts to punishment before trial." But judges kept denying bail, with Judge John Murphy III stating, "The serious nature of the charges and the potential for flight risk require continued detention." Meanwhile, the courtroom footage that's been leaking has added another layer to the public perception. Every outburst, every smile, every gesture gets analyzed on social media. When Melly laughed during a serious moment, people said it showed he was a psychopath. When he cried during victim impact statements, people said he was faking. One Twitter user with 100K followers posted, "Watch his body language. Guilty people don't act like that. He's putting on a show." Another countered, "Y'all playing detective from a 30-second clip. Let the jury decide." Everything became evidence in the court of public opinion. It's why this recent reaction in court has generated so much reaction. It throws a new twist in a story that many concluded open and closed. Melly's music and background becomes more understandable to those who would take the time to listen and understand. The judge situation has been its own drama. Multiple judges have been involved, each bringing their own style and interpretations. Judge Andrew Siegel recused himself, citing scheduling conflicts. Judge John Murphy III took over, but then had his own issues with the defense team. Judge Michael Usan had to step in briefly. Some seemed more favorable to the defense, others to the prosecution. Each change meant new dynamics, new strategies, potential delays. It's like trying to play a basketball game where the refs keep changing and each one calls fouls differently. Discovery battles have been fierce. The defense has accused the prosecution of withholding evidence, of not turning over potentially exculpatory materials. In one heated exchange in March 2024, Bradford Cohen told the judge, "The state is playing games with discovery. They're hiding evidence that could prove our client's innocence. We filed 17 motions for specific evidence that mysteriously can't be found." The prosecution shot back, with Christine Bradley saying, "The defense is grasping at straws and making baseless accusations." Both sides have had to deal with witnesses disappearing, changing their stories, or refusing to cooperate. The streets don't pause for court proceedings. What's really wild is how this trial has become a litmus test for bigger issues. It's not just about whether Melly killed his friends anymore. It's about whether rap lyrics should be evidence, whether young black men can get fair trials, whether the death penalty should exist at all. Legal scholars are writing papers about this case. Law schools are using it as a teaching tool. Professor Michelle Alexander from NYU Law said in a lecture that went viral, "This case represents everything wrong with how we prosecute young black men in America, from the death penalty to the use of artistic expression as evidence. It's transcended its original boundaries. The financial toll has been staggering. Legal fees in the millions, expert witnesses charging thousands per day, court costs piling up. Melly's music money is being drained by his defense. His mother Jamie started a GoFundMe that raised over $150,000 for legal fees. She posted, 'We've spent everything trying to prove my son's innocence. We need help.' His family has had to make sacrifices, sell property, beg fans for support. The system isn't just trying to take his life, it's already taken his wealth, his time, his youth." As we sit here in late 2025, the retrial is supposedly set for September, but nobody really believes that date will stick. There's too much at stake, too many appeals pending, too many motions to resolve. Melly's been in jail for over 6 years now, longer than some people serve for actual convictions. Each day that passes is another day of his life gone. Whether he's guilty or innocent, he's missed birthdays, holidays, the birth of his nephew, his grandmother's funeral. His whole 20s been spent behind bars waiting for justice that keeps getting delayed. The prosecution seems confident, saying they've strengthened their case, found new evidence, refined their approach. Sources close to the case say they have new ballistics evidence and possibly a new witness. The defense seems equally confident, saying the hung jury proved reasonable doubt exists, that time has only revealed more holes in the state's case. But confidence doesn't mean much when you're dealing with a system this complex, this unpredictable. Both sides know that everything could change with one ruling, one piece of evidence, one witness. The stakes couldn't be higher, and September 2025 is shaping up to be the trial of the decade in hip-hop. Chapter 4, Hip Hop on Trial, YNW. Melly's case has become ground zero for a battle that's been brewing for decades, the criminalization of rap music in American courtrooms. When prosecutor Christine Bradley pressed play on Murder on My Mind in that Broward County courtroom, she wasn't just presenting evidence, she was weaponizing art. And the implications of that moment stretch far beyond Melly's fate, touching every artist who's ever picked up a mic to tell their truth. The prosecution's strategy was calculated and cold. They took a song Melly wrote before the murders even happened, a track that millions of people related to, that had 500 million streams on Spotify, and transformed it into a confession. They argued that lines like, "Wake up in the morning, I got murder on my mind," and AK-47s, Mac 11s, Glocks, and 9s showed premeditation, that the vivid descriptions of violence revealed a killer's mindset. Prosecutor Bradley told the jury, "These aren't just lyrics. This is a confession hiding in plain sight. He's telling you what he did." Never mind that the song was recorded in 2017, a full year before the deaths of Juvie and Sack Chaser. In the prosecution's narrative, art became prophecy. The prosecution seems hell-bent on making the song what it is not. Artistic freedoms is now used in the court to nail a man to the cross and win points to justify a preconceived notion. But here's what's really wild. Melly's case isn't isolated. All across America, prosecutors are building cases on bars and rhymes. Young Thug and Gunna caught RICO charges with their lyrics used as evidence, with prosecutors literally reading YSL songs in court. Drakeo the Ruler spent years fighting murder charges where his music was central to the prosecution. They played his music videos in court. Tay K got 55 years with his song The Race played in court. The prosecutor said the song was a confession wrapped in a beat. Mac Phipps is still doing 30 years partly because of his rap lyrics. They used his song Murder, Murder, Kill, Kill against him. It's like there's a whole playbook now for how to use hip-hop against hip-hop artists. The legal precedent this sets is terrifying for the culture. If every violent bar can be used as evidence, then every rapper becomes a potential defendant. Think about the implications. Biggie talking about robberies, Jay-Z's drug dealing bars, Eminem's violent fantasies, Nas talking about shootouts. Under this logic, the entire genre becomes one massive self-incrimination. Eric Nielsen, who wrote the book Rap on Trial, said in an interview, "No other art form is used like this in court. You don't see country singers prosecuted for murder ballads. It's blatant discrimination against black art. The art form that gave voice to the voiceless is being twisted into a tool of mass incarceration. What makes this especially insidious is the racial component. You don't see country singers getting arrested for songs about shooting cheaters. Johnny Cash saying, 'I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die,' and nobody tried to link that to real murders. Bob Marley saying, 'I shot the sheriff and stayed free.' Rock stars don't get their lyrics used against them when they sing about drug use. Heavy metal bands talk about murder and Satan and nobody's in court. It's specifically rap, specifically black and brown artists who face this treatment. The same system that profits off hip-hop culture through streaming and sales turns around and uses that same content to fill prison cells. Defense attorneys across the country have started fighting back, arguing that using rap lyrics as evidence violates the First Amendment and relies on racial bias. They point out that fiction writers don't get charged for murder scenes in their novels, that movie directors don't get arrested for violent films. Why should rappers be treated differently? Attorney Alex Spiro, who's defended Jay-Z and Bobby Shmurda, said in a panel discussion, "This is about creative expression. We don't arrest Stephen King for writing horror novels. We don't prosecute Quentin Tarantino for violent movies. The only difference is the color of the artist." The answer, unfortunately, often comes down to who's telling the story and who's listening. In Melly's case, his lawyers have tried to educate the jury about hip-hop as an art form. They've brought in experts to explain metaphor, hyperbole, and artistic license. Professor Adam Dunbar from University of Nevada testified as an expert witness. Rap uses a specific form of storytelling that shouldn't be taken literally. It's performative, not documentary. When Melly says, "I got murder on my mind," it's no different than Johnny Cash saying, "I shot a man in Reno." They've shown how rappers create personas, tell stories that aren't necessarily autobiographical, paint pictures for entertainment. But it's an uphill battle when you're dealing with jurors who might not understand or appreciate the culture. The chilling effect this has on creativity is already visible. Young artists are self-censoring, watering down their content, scared that keeping it too real might land them in court. Lawyers are sitting in on studio sessions, reviewing lyrics before release. One A&R executive from Atlantic Records who wanted to stay anonymous said, "We got lawyers reviewing bars now. Artists scared to say anything real. That's not hip hop, that's corporate music. The street's getting silenced." The raw, unfiltered expression that made hip hop powerful is being filtered through legal fear. The streets are being silenced by the threat of prosecution. Some states have started recognizing this problem. California passed the Decriminalizing Artistic Expression Act in 2022, limiting the use of rap lyrics as evidence. New York followed with similar legislation, but these are band-aids on a bullet wound. The fundamental issue, a justice system that sees black art as confession rather than expression, remains unchanged. And until that shifts, every rapper is potentially one case away from having their art used against them. Fat Joe testified before Congress about this in November 2023, saying, "They're using our art to destroy us. They don't do this to white artists. This has to stop." What's particularly twisted about Melly's situation is that "Murder on My Mind" wasn't even about the crime he's accused of. The song tells a different story with different details, different circumstances. The song talks about a girlfriend, about an accident, completely different from what happened to Juvie and Sack Chaser. But the prosecution doesn't care about accuracy, they care about impact. They know that hearing Melly's voice describing murder will affect the jury, regardless of context or timing. It's emotional manipulation disguised as evidence. One juror from the first trial, speaking anonymously to Local 10 News, admitted, "That song stuck with me throughout the whole trial. It was hard to separate it from the case, even though I knew it was recorded before." The international hip-hop community has rallied around this issue. Artists from Drake to J. Cole have spoken out about the injustice of using lyrics as evidence. Drake posted on Instagram, "If lyrics are evidence, then every rapper is guilty. Free Melly and everyone else caught up in this." Producer Metro Boomin called it modern-day slavery on Twitter. Jay-Z wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled, "Rap on Trial, How Art Became Evidence." Meek Mill has been vocal about the issue, tweeting, "They trying to use our pain against us. The same pain that made us rich, they using to lock us up. There's a growing recognition that this isn't just about individual cases. It's about the survival of hip-hop as an honest art form. If artists can't speak their truth without fear of prosecution, then what's the point? Legal scholars have started documenting this phenomenon, calling it rap on trial. Studies show that when rap lyrics are introduced as evidence, conviction rates increase significantly. Dr. Charis Kubrin from UC Irvine conducted a study that found rap lyrics prejudice jurors against defendants, even when the lyrics are clearly fictional. The same violent content in other genres doesn't have this effect. Jurors who might have reasonable doubts suddenly see defendants as dangerous when they hear violent lyrics. It's prejudicial in the most literal sense, creating prejudice through art rather than evidence. The irony is thick when you consider how America consumes hip-hop, the same society that makes these songs go platinum, that puts them in movies and commercials, that celebrates the culture when it's profitable, turns around and criminalizes the creators. Billboard charts love violent rap. Murder on My Mind went 5x platinum. Hollywood uses it in soundtracks. Fast and Furious had it on their playlist. Video games like Grand Theft Auto built empires on this music. Corporations use it to sell products. Fashion brands love the edge. It's like inviting someone to dinner then arresting them for eating. The hypocrisy is staggering. For young artists coming up now, the message is clear and terrifying. Your art can and will be used against you. That notebook where you write bars, potential evidence, that voice memo where you're freestyling, could be played in court. One young rapper from Miami, who goes by Lil Jit, said in an interview, "I stopped writing certain things down. My lawyer told me to be careful what I say on tracks. I'm scared they'll use it against me later, but if I can't talk about my reality, what's the point?" The very tools of creativity become weapons in the hands of prosecutors. It's enough to make anyone think twice about picking up a pen. The resistance is growing, though. Organizations like Protect Black Art are fighting to change laws and educate the public. They've organized protests, lobbied politicians, created documentaries. Defense attorneys are getting better at challenging the use of lyrics as evidence. Some judges are starting to question the practice. Judge Dennis McLaughlin in Philadelphia ruled against using lyrics in 2023, saying, "Admission of defendants' rap lyrics would be more prejudicial than probative. This practice has a disparate impact on young men of color. But change is slow, and every day that passes, another artist faces the possibility of their art becoming their indictment." In Melly's case, the battle over his lyrics has become central to his defense. His team argues that allowing Murder on My Mind as evidence poisoned the jury pool, that it's impossible to get a fair trial when your art is being weaponized against you. They filed appeal after appeal trying to get the song excluded from the retrial. One of their motions, filed in April 2024, stated, "The use of artistic expression as criminal evidence violates the First Amendment and perpetuates racial bias in the justice system. Mr. Demons cannot receive a fair trial when his art is being used to convict him of crimes he didn't commit." Whether they succeed could determine not just Melly's fate, but the future of how hip-hop is treated in courtrooms. The prosecutors, for their part, show no signs of backing down. They argue that the lyrics are relevant, that they show state of mind, that they're not criminalizing art, but using available evidence. Prosecutor Bradley said in a hearing, "If someone writes about committing crimes in detail and then commits those exact crimes, the writing is relevant. We're not prosecuting him for his music, we're prosecuting him for murder." It's a cold, calculated position that ignores the cultural context and racial implications. To them, a conviction is worth more than the precedent they're setting. As the retrial approaches, this issue looms large. Will the jury be able to separate art from evidence? Can they listen to Murder on My Mind without prejudice? Or will Melly's creativity become the rope that hangs him? These questions go beyond one case. They touch the heart of what it means to be a hip-hop artist in America today. The culture is watching, and the outcome could change everything. Every young artist with a pen and a dream is waiting to see if their art will remain protected expression or become potential evidence. The stakes couldn't be higher. The streets are watching, waiting to see if one of their own can beat the system that's designed to destroy them. September 2025 ain't just a trial date. It's a moment that could redefine what's possible for artists caught in the system. Chapter 5, The Verdict of the Streets. As YNW Melly's retrial approaches, the streets have already held their own trial. Barbershops, Instagram comments, YouTube discussions, Twitter spaces, everywhere you look, people are debating his guilt or innocence. But more than that, they're debating what his case means for hip-hop, for justice, for young black men trying to escape poverty through music. The verdict of the streets is complicated, divided, and deeply emotional. In his hometown of Gifford, Florida, the division is stark. You got old heads who remember Melvin as a kid, who refused to believe he could do something so cold. They talk about how he used to help elderly neighbors with groceries, how he'd give his last dollar to homeless folks. Ms. Johnson, who's lived on his block for 30 years, told WPTV News, "That boy used to cut my grass for free, bring me groceries when I was sick. I don't believe he did this. The Melvin I knew couldn't hurt nobody." To them, he's still that sweet kid who got caught up in something bigger than himself. But you also got people who whisper about always knowing something was off, who claim they saw the darkness early. One anonymous neighbor told the same reporter, he had two sides. We all saw it. The hip-hop community's response has been telling. Major artists have been cautiously supportive but notably quiet. A Free Melly post here and there, but no major campaigns, no protest songs, no unified movement like we've seen for other incarcerated artists. There's a visible distraction that hasn't allowed the public to see the problem at hand for what it is. Hopefully the realization doesn't come late, too late to support and fight for another black man who is fighting systemized injustice. Boozy went on Vlad TV and said, "The system trying to kill our young kings, Free Melly, but them charges heavy, I ain't gonna lie." Kodak Black, who's from the same area, posted Free Melly, but then deleted it. Lil Durk shouted him out on a song but kept it brief, but most stayed quiet. It's like everyone's waiting to see how this plays out before fully committing. The accusations are too heavy, the evidence too ambiguous for anyone to stick their neck out completely. On social media, the debates rage endlessly. His supporters point to the hung jury as proof of reasonable doubt. They dissect the evidence, create YouTube videos breaking down inconsistencies, share theories about what really happened that night. YouTuber Trap Laura Ross made a 2-hour documentary questioning the evidence that got 5 million views. The comment section was a war zone. They're not just fans anymore. They've become amateur investigators, defense attorneys, activists. Their belief in his innocence has become part of their identity. One Twitter account, @JusticeForMelly, got 50K followers just posting about the case daily. The other side is equally passionate. They point to the forensic evidence, the cell phone data, the alleged lies about the drive-by. They ask hard questions about why someone would fake a crime scene if they're innocent. One viral TikTok with 2 million views said, "If he didn't do it, why lie about the drive-by? Why drive around with the bodies? Make it make sense." They bring up his lyrics, his persona, the duality that everyone acknowledges. To them, the case is clear-cut, and supporting Melly means supporting a killer. The comment sections under his music videos have become battlegrounds, with people arguing about guilt and innocence instead of the music. What's fascinating is how the case has become a mirror for bigger issues. When people argue about Melly, they're really arguing about systemic racism, about the criminalization of black youth, about whether the justice system works. His case has become a symbol, and symbols carry weight that goes beyond individual guilt or innocence. Professor Trisha Rose from Brown University said in a lecture that went viral on YouTube, "This case represents everything wrong with how we criminalize black artistic expression. It's about more than one young man. It's about a system." The families of the victims, Juvie and Sackchazer, have been remarkably dignified through all this. Some have publicly forgiven Melly, saying they don't believe he did it. Juvie's sister posted on Instagram, "My brother loved Melly. I know in my heart he didn't do this. The real killer's still out there." She got death threats in her DMs for that post. But Sackchaser's cousin went on Instagram Live saying, "Y'all supporting the killer? My cousin dead and y'all talking about Free Melly. Where's the justice for our family?" Others have stayed silent, letting the legal process play out. But imagine their pain, losing loved ones and then watching the accused become a cause célèbre. Every Free Melly post must feel like a slap in the face to those who believe he's guilty. The Florida hip-hop scene has been forever changed by this case. Artists move differently now, more careful about their associations, more aware of how quickly brotherhood can turn to bloodshed. Kodak Black addressed it in an interview saying, "The streets watching everything now, everybody moving paranoid, can't trust nobody." The YNW movement that was supposed to put Broward County on the map has become a cautionary tale about loyalty and betrayal. Young artists study what happened and adjust accordingly. They're more careful about who they keep close, more aware that success can breed jealousy. There's also the uncomfortable conversation about mental health that this case has sparked. Melly's obvious struggles with his dual personality, his talk of demons and depression, his cry for help disguised as music. It all points to someone who needed intervention, not incarceration. Mental health advocate Dr. Jessica Clemens said on The Breakfast Club, "We're criminalizing mental illness instead of treating it." This young man showed clear signs of dissociative behavior, but the streets don't have therapists on every corner. They have guns and drugs and trauma, and sometimes that cocktail creates tragedies. If Melly had gotten help early, would 2 young men still be alive? The economic impact on his community has been real too. Melly was starting to give back, starting to invest in Gifford, starting to create opportunities. He had plans for a youth center, was funding back-to-school drives, paying for kids' football equipment. Young cats who saw him as their way out have had to find new dreams. The money that would have flowed back to the hood is now going to lawyers and court fees. Another generational wealth opportunity lost to the system. Local activist Marcus Johnson said at a community meeting, "We lost more than an artist. We lost someone who was going to change things here. Now that money going to the system instead of the streets." What's really deep is how this case has affected the way people listen to his music. Can you separate the art from the artist when the art might be evidence? Every time Murder on My Mind comes on, there's a moment of hesitation. Is it okay to vibe to this? Are we celebrating violence? Or are we just appreciating a young man's artistic expression of pain? DJ at Club Live in Miami said, "I still play his hits, but the energy different now. People don't know how to feel. Some sing along, some just stand there. The song still slaps, but it hits different when you think about what happened." The international perspective is interesting too. Overseas, where the details of the case are less known, Melly is often seen purely as another victim of the American justice system. His music still hits hard in places where the accusations don't overshadow the artistry. UK rapper Heady One said on Twitter, "In London, we see it as the system attacking black excellence. Free Melly." French rapper Ninho posted support. Brazilian fans still go crazy for his music. It's a reminder that perspective shapes perception, that the same person can be a villain or a victim depending on where you're standing. As the retrial approaches, the pressure is building. This isn't just about one man's fate anymore. It's about whether the system that targets young black artists will claim another victim. It's about whether art can be criminalized. It's about whether someone can change, grow, and deserve a second chance. The stakes couldn't be higher. Attorney Ben Crump, though not on the case, commented on CNN, "This trial will set precedents that affect every young black artist in America." We're watching closely. The prosecutors know they're not just trying YNW Melly, they're trying a culture. Every piece of evidence they present is scrutinized not just for legal relevance, but for racial implications. Every argument they make is weighed against the history of injustice. They have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to a community that reasonably doubts the system itself. One protest organizer outside the courthouse said, "We're watching to make sure this ain't another lynching disguised as justice. Too many of our young men been railroaded." The defense team carries the weight of more than just their client. They're defending hip-hop's right to exist without criminalization. They're fighting for every young artist who uses music to process trauma. They're standing between the culture and a system that would love nothing more than to silence it. Win or lose, their arguments will echo in courtrooms for years to come. Bradford Cohen said at a press conference, "This isn't just about Melly. This is about protecting black art from prosecution. This is about the First Amendment." For Melly himself, sitting in that cell, the weight must be unbearable. Knowing that you've become a symbol, that your case represents something bigger than yourself. Every decision you make, every outburst in court, every smile or tear is analyzed and interpreted. You're not just fighting for your freedom, you're fighting for a generation that sees themselves in you. In a recent call that was posted on YouTube, he said, "I feel the weight of everybody watching. I can't let them down. This bigger than me now." The sad truth is that regardless of the verdict, everyone has already lost something. 2 young men are dead, their future stolen, families are destroyed, mothers crying for sons who ain't coming home. A community is divided, friends choosing sides, a promising career is derailed, talent wasted behind bars. The culture is under attack, artists scared to speak their truth. Even if Melly walks free tomorrow, you can't undo 6 years of incarceration. You can't bring back the dead. You can't heal all the wounds this case has opened. Community leader Reverend Williams said at a vigil, "Whatever happens, we need healing. Too much pain, too much loss already." But hip-hop has always been about rising from ashes, about turning pain into power. Maybe that's what will come from this tragedy. Maybe the culture will unite to protect its artists. Maybe laws will change. California and New York already started. Maybe the next YNW Melly will get help instead of handcuffs. Maybe something beautiful can grow from all this ugliness. Activist Tamika Mallory posted, "From pain comes purpose. We won't let this be in vain. The culture will remember and learn." As we wait for September 2025, as we wait for 12 jurors to decide one man's fate, the streets continue their own deliberations. Every barbershop debate, every social media argument, every played or skipped song is a vote in the court of public opinion. And in that court, the jury is still out, the evidence is still being weighed, and the verdict remains unwritten. One thing's for sure, though, the streets never forget, and they're watching every move. The story of YNW Melly is still being told. Whether it ends in redemption or tragedy, whether he becomes a symbol of injustice overcome or potential destroyed remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, his case has forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about art, justice, race, and redemption. The conversations happening in barbershops and on social media, the debates about lyrics as evidence, the questions about mental health and justice, these matter. And maybe, just maybe, that conversation is the first step toward change. The culture is resilient, and whatever happens, hip-hop will survive. But the question is, how many more YNW Mellys will we lose before things change? Until that verdict comes, we wait, we watch, we argue, we hope, we fear. We remember two young men who aren't here to tell their side. Juvie and Sack Chaucer, forever young, their stories cut short. We think about a third young man who might never be free to tell his. And we wonder what it all means for a culture that refuses to be silenced even when silence might be safer. The streets are watching, and history will judge us all by what happens next. September 2025 ain't just a court date. It's a reckoning for hip-hop, for justice, for America itself. And we all got a stake in how this story ends, whether it's freedom or life behind bars, whether it's justice or injustice. The culture will remember. The streets will remember. And maybe that memory will be what saves the next young artist from the same fate. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and click on the box to watch another video.